Welcome to today's Friday Live. It's the 27th of February, 2026, and today I've got an exercise for you, a cube study. Now, it might not seem like the most interesting thing to paint, but I can tell you I spent an awful lot of time painting cubes and spheres when I was trying to figure out value, when I was struggling a little bit with value. And studies like this will really, really help you because you don't have to deal with a lot of other complicated stuff. The first one being, can I make a beautiful painting out of this? I would argue that you can, even out of a cube. And we'll see how far we get. But the point of this is today's exercise that I'm going to show you is a demonstration on how to absolutely nail the values that you see in a reference photo in your painting. Okay, using ChromaMagic and the Paul Centore value scale. So you need those two things. Details on those are in the description if you want to get hold of them. There's also a link to the reference photo so you can actually try this. Probably going to be painting for about an hour today. And there's one thing I want you to bear in mind while you look at this reference photo, and if you have a go at this, the cube that we're painting, the tabletop that it's sitting on, and the background behind them are all about the same value. Independent of the light, they're all about the same. They're all like a middle-ish value. So what that means is all that we're painting is light and shadow. The only tools that we've got, if you like, to create space are how we create the effect of light and shadow, okay? So I'm going to get straight over to the easel now. Let me bring up that ChromaMagic here so you can see that. I think I had the stream running there for a little bit, slightly confusing. So I want to show you a couple of things about this in ChromaMagic first. So the first thing is, one of the really useful things about ChromaMagic, by the way, is that you can change the grid thing here. Hopefully you can see ChromaMagic at the top right of the screen. So I've actually got it set to 3. I'm going to set it to 3. And the reason I'm going to do that, no, not 2. Come on, Paul. Do the thing 3. There, 3. Is because, look, the sides of the cube pretty much line up exactly. It's almost as if it was arranged that way. So it just makes it a little bit easier to draw out, okay? But the bit that we're really interested in is the values. So we've got 3 sides to a cube. So we really only need to deal with 3 values, 3 main values, okay, to try and keep things a little bit simpler. The light. I'm going to click on here and make the sample size like a decent size, okay? So this is pretty big sample size. If you've never seen this app before, ChromaMagic, I highly recommend you get hold of it. You can get it from the Mac store, the Google Play store. You can get it for Windows. You can get it for Mac. It's something like $20, which is outrageous considering how useful it is. And if you try this tool together with the value scale, the Munsell value scale, the real value of this is that it will show you how to get your values right and potentially save you years of frustration trying to learn to do it by eye. It will help you calibrate your eye, okay? So let's see what we're getting here. This is like a 6.5. In terms of the value scale that we've got down here, if I click in a dark bit, it's what you'd expect. It's like a value 1 right down the bottom, right? The light part won't quite show it up because it's between 2 values, but it's about a 6.5. It's about here, right? The top part is about a value 3. So this is the number that we're interested in over here, this value 3, and this is going to be like a value 1, right? See that 1. So we want about a 6, 6.5 on the light side. We want a 3 there, and we want a 1. So assuming you can remember 3 numbers, which I can't always, that's what we're going to paint. Now, the tabletop over here in the light, I'm going to say, well, it's about a 5.5, you know, about a 5.5 to a 6, not quite as light as the front of the cube. Now, over the far side, the left-hand side, it gets quite a lot darker. And that's just because the light is coming from the right, so it's light drop-off. The shadow side, sorry, the cast shadow, that the cube is casting onto the tabletop is pretty much the same value as the shadow side of the cube. So that means that we're going to ignore this edge. We're going to paint this all as one shape, right? Same value over here. Very slightly lighter here, just enough to be able to see the cast shadow, right? But it's really subtle. And this value here, now you might think that this on the background here looks quite dark. And it is, it's a value 3, but it's about the same value as we've got here. See that? Looks darker, right? Because your brain is telling you it's in the background and there's less light, but it's about the same value. Kind of useful thing to know, huh? Okay, so that's how you click about and you find out the values. Now, obviously, with something that's a bit simpler like this, like a cube, it's slightly less complicated than if you're trying to paint something really, really complicated. A complicated form like a jug, you know, flowers. This makes the whole thing a lot easier, which is why we've chosen a cube. But we're not just going to be painting the cube. I'm also going to be talking about simplifying form. And yes, even though this is a cube, we can still simplify it because we're painting light and shadow shapes, okay? We're not painting things. We're not painting the cube. And I'm going to talk about edge handling, and I'm also going to talk about varying the thickness of the paint as you work. The first thing we need to do is get a little grid on here. So I'm going to start with a little bit of raw umber I've got here, and white. You could use black and white. If you were a real stickler, you could even mix like perfect neutrals if you wanted to. I mean, you can use any color you like, to be fair. But the dark color needs to get down to about a value 1, right? So if I take this, here is my Munsell value scale. So if I take this dark value, put it on there at the value 1, that's about a value 1. This is raw umber. These are both Michael Harding, raw umber, titanium white. Oh, forgot something. We've got to oil out the panel first. So a little bit of oil, linseed oil, makeup sponge. And I'm just going to wipe this over the panel just to cover it. Just helps the paint go on. You might not need to do this depending on what kind of panel you're using, what kind of surface. But these Ampersand panels are quite absorbent, and it really, really helps to have an oil layer on there first. I mean, to be honest with you, for most surfaces that you paint on, having an oil layer is just going to really help. Okay. But then you wipe it off and make sure it's really thin, because what you don't want is a really thick, gunky load of oil that you're painting into. Let's get our grid down really quick. Now, I must apologize for the maths involved in this, because this is a 5 by 7 inch panel, which means to divide 7 into 3, it's like, it's 1.6. You know what I mean? I'm going to do it mostly by eye. As long as we're close, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's about thirds. I did measure and put some little marks, but I just wiped them off a little bit. So something like that, right? Divide it into 3 both ways. If anybody's watching this live, hasn't seen one of these Friday Lives before and is curious about ChromaMagic, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. And they may even be answered by the designer of the app who is here. Very good to see everybody. Stephanie, hi. Stephanie, I owe you an apology. I still haven't got round to uploading the critique recording from the workshop, but it is going to be done very soon. I'll do my very best to do it tomorrow, okay? Maybe I'll get it done tonight. We'll see how we go. David, good to see you. Hello, Circa. I haven't seen you for a long time. Nice to see you again. Hello, Stanley. Hello, Diane. We've got lots of people watching today. I can't go through everybody. So sorry about that, but hello to everybody and thank you for coming. So we're going to draw it out really, really quickly. So these lines pretty much coincide with the furthest left and furthest right point. So I want like the top of the cube kind of comes up about there, that like the highest point. The lowest point of the cube is somewhere around here. So I want to divide this distance here to something like where the nearest edge of the cube is going to be something like this, right? So that'll be the bottom of the cube. We'll go up to the corner. So this all makes things a little bit more easy. So I've tried to set this up so it's a little bit easier to draw out. Slightly steeper angle there because of the perspective. So the other side of the cube is going to be about here, up to about there. That will go. That can give us a rough idea of where that edge will be. This one is going to come to about there. So you can kind of use the grid to just, you know, get something that's reasonably, hopefully reasonably close to a cube. Mine's awful, actually. Looks really out. This corner's going to go up to about there. It'll do. It'll be fine. Don't worry. It'll be fine. So that's basically where the cube sits. But I also want to paint in where the shadow, I want to draw out where the shadow goes. So the cast shadow starts from this edge. And it goes all the way back to about here. Notice you can't really see this edge here, even though I've painted it in. I've drawn it out. The back of the cast shadow starts about here and it goes back to about there. So we can't really see these edges of the cube, right? So I'm going to knock them out. Right at the drawing stage, I'm going to knock them out because we're not going to paint them, okay? This is all one shape. I'm also not going to bother with the edge of the tabletop there because if I squint down, it's not really very clear and we don't really need it, but we do have a load of shadow here. And the cast shadow, although it's a very soft edge, the edge of this shadow here is something like that. That's it. That's all we've got to draw out. You from France, is that Farzane or is it's so difficult trying to translate people's YouTube handles, but anyway, welcome. Farzane File 5161. It's very good to see you. I hope you enjoyed this session today. Now, Guy says an interesting thing. I love the update, so much better on a laptop with positioning the image. I hate to have crutches, but your app is my go-to. Now, I don't think you should think about it as a crutch. I think you should think about it as a learning tool. Now, if you were producing final paintings and you wanted them to be kind of very expressive and interpretive, and you were, you know, putting them into a show or something like that, then arguably, you know, you could make a case for saying that it was a crutch, although even then I'm not too convinced. But ChromaMagic is a learning tool, and that's how we're going to use it today, okay? So we're already ready to start putting in some values. So what did we say this shape was? This whole shape is a value 1, right? So I'm going to get a bigger brush. And I would encourage you to use the biggest brushes that you can control for this. And I'm going to paint that in a value 1, which is, this is burnt umber like straight out of the tube. We'll just whack everything in to begin with, and then we'll sort out the edges later. Notice painting across the edge of the cube, because it's all one shape, right? So immediately, we're painting a shape. We're not painting things, we're ignoring the edge of the cube. But notice how even just putting this in, all as a single shape, immediately your brain starts to read that. Now your brain knows, you know, that's all it took, and your brain knows where the light is coming from. Cool, huh? Your brain reads the whole thing as a shadow, and your brain knows that the rest of the cube is there, even though I've deliberately painted over it and you can't see it, right? We've got a shadow over here too. So we'll just paint these in for the moment, and then we'll sort out our edges in a little while. Shadow area here. See, your brain actually doesn't need that much information to start making an image. It needs a lot less information than you think, and that's why a lot of the time it's actually destructive to your painting to be adding a lot of detail, especially at the beginning. Okay. Now, I think what I'm going to do, I think what will be interesting is now we'll paint the values on the cube and then we'll do everything around it, because it's when everything around it goes in that you really see the values work. But I want you to see those values on the cube go down and it be a little bit like, huh? It's going to look a bit wrong until we put everything in. That's good to hear. My pronunciation is not as bad as it could be. Atitak 14 says, I could not find the value scale in my country. Yeah, you have to get it from the US. One of my friends is going to buy one from the US. It's going to bring me 2 or 3 weeks later. Brilliant. Get a couple. Get them to get you a couple. Because sometimes if you get solvent under them, they can kind of delaminate a little bit. And they're so cheap. It's like, you know. What did we say we wanted here? We wanted like a 6.5 here. So now we've got to do some mixing. I'm going to go over to the palette here for this. I want to show you a little bit more clearly what I'm doing. So we want like a value 6.5. So that's a value 6. There's a 7, and there is a 6.5. So we want about this value here, right? So I'm going to get some raw umber. Actually, don't need anything like that much. And I'm going to put in a bit of white. Not too much white, because this is titanium white. It's incredibly strong. I put way too much out there. I'm thinking in terms of, as I always do in lead white, which I would have needed a lot more for. But the reason we're doing this with raw umber and titanium white is that they're cheap. The paints are cheap. So you can do loads and loads and loads and loads of practice like this. You will learn a huge amount and won't cost you very much. And then the point is, like, if you practice a lot with stuff like this and then you just paint, your estimates will be a lot closer than they ever were before you did the practice, right? So this is the value I want. Remember, the 6.5. What have I got? A little bit dark still. Add a little bit more white. Now, this bit might take you a little while if you're not used to mixing values to, you know, an accurate kind of a scale like this. But basically, all of these values translate on this scale, translate pretty much to the numbers that we saw, the Munsell numbers that we saw in the app. Because ChromaMagic works on the Munsell value scale, and this is a Munsell value scale. How cool is that? So we can use this scale to translate the values that we see in the ChromaMagic app directly to our picture, right? So there's our 6.5. Let's paint it in. Get another brush out for this. I'm not messing about with pretty little brushes though. Look, I'm not that bothered about the accuracy, but I'm gonna paint this. Can you see that? I've got a lot of paint on this brush. Oh, clag it on. It's like I'm plastering a wall. Think of it as plastering a wall, right? Don't think about the value, just think about the shape. The values aren't going to make sense until we get the whole thing filled in anyway. So just think about the shape. Get to the corner with the tip. Nice, thick paint. Don't be shy. You see, I want to be able to see the paint. I want to be able to see the texture of the paint. It's going to make it feel more physical, more there. Texture in the light, thick paint in the light. I mean, this is like an old master technique, really. Thin shadows, thick lights. Kind of looks a bit weird at the moment, right? But now we need to do the value on the top plane of the sphere, and that was a 3, right? I'm doing really well, by the way, aren't I, with remembering my value numbers today. I'm quite impressed with myself. Value 3. So the value 3 on the scale is here. Faye Kelly, very, very good point. The app is great for analyzing the color palettes in art history if you want to make master copies. It is brilliant for that. I would generally try and look for like really high quality photos, like on gallery websites, like the National Gallery website and stuff like that. They're usually like pretty close. They have professionals come in and photograph them or scan the paintings or whatever, so they're usually pretty close. Sometimes they can be really out. Have I got a value 3? It's a tiny bit too light. Bring a little bit more raw umber into it. That's pretty much it. A little bit too light still. So what I'm doing when I'm looking at this and I'm judging it, I'm getting an actual dab of paint and I'm putting it onto the scale, which you can do because the scale is laminated. You can wipe it off afterwards. As you can see, I'm not always very careful about wiping mine off and they get a bit dirty. But a strong solvent will pick up paint even after it's dried out a little bit. Good, value 3, that's what we want. Hello, Laura. Laura says, at first I was disappointed it was just a cube, but even in these first 15 minutes, I can see how much I would benefit. Brilliant. That is brilliant. And actually, the fact that we're not trying to make a painting, it releases you from a lot of the stuff that makes you make mistakes while you're painting. We get a smaller brush now, so our value 3 is going to go in, and it's still not going to look right, not until we put in all of the background values. So even as cubes go, this one is kind of tricky in a way because the values are really, really close. I may have to put a little bit more raw umber in the dark ones because raw umber is semi-transparent. These shadows, it's probably not quite a value 1. But incidentally, that gives me a little reminder of something else that I can show you that works really well as well, is you can check what values you're getting. So have I got a value 1 there? You can actually put the scale against your paintings. Not quite a 1, it's a little bit higher than a 1. It's probably like about 1.5 to a 2. Have I got a 3 there? You know, I can put this on and check. That looks pretty good. The 3 looks good. Have I got a 6.5 here? Obviously, if you rest it right on, you're going to get a little bit of. Here's my 6.5, right? You're going to get a bit of paint on your value scale. So it's dependent to an extent on how good your lighting is. Speaking of which, I've forgotten to move my main light over. Let's get that sorted out now. There we go. Be a bit better now. A bit more light on it. Let's see if we can get this a little bit thicker here so we can see the value difference better. Can you see that? It's like when I put a little bit more paint on, it goes a little bit more opaque and the value is better. You can see the value difference a little bit more. Might have to bring it down even a little bit more than that. The only thing we can do to bring the value down further is add black, which is more opaque. I've got a little gap in my front plane here. So what other values have we got? We had like about a 5-ish, a little bit more over here, down to a 4 over there. So now I've shown you like in detail how to mix those values. I'm going to do these a little bit more quickly. Get that one out of the way. That was our 6.5. So I want a bit more paint this time because we've got a bigger area to cover. We want about a 5. Too much white. It's a funny thing about being used to lead white is that every time I do a mix now with titanium white, I always put too much white in. The pattern is established in my brain of how much white I need. But the pattern is established for lead white. Michelle says, is the camera making the 3 look darker than it is? Probably a little bit, but it's mostly to do with light. It's tricky to get it set up exactly. It may be that let me bring the exposure up a little bit. But it's difficult to match them exactly at the moment because I haven't got it all filled in. So we'll check it in a little while, and I'll try and balance the camera exposure to the photo. But regardless, it doesn't make any difference for if you're doing this at home. Trust your value scale. Like I can see the difference here between these two values. It might not be so obvious on the screen. But they are close anyway. They're pretty close, those values. What are we after here? About a 5-ish. A little bit less crucial. Now the light is coming from over on the right-hand side. So it's hitting this plane more directly than this one. So there's slightly less light in this one. That's about 5.5. Let's chuck a load of that on there. And I think it's likely that, having noticed this before, I think it's likely that cameras are a little bit like the human eye, and it's easier to see differences between light values than it is dark ones. So I'm not going to do any edging. Like this needs to be a soft edge. We'll sort that out in a minute. For the moment, I'm just going to paint this in. So it's going to be very simplified. But over this side, it's darker. We wanted about a value 4. So I've got about a 5 here, and I've got a 3 here. So if I mix them together, I should be able to get to a 4 pretty quick. Check it on the scale. If you try this, like really, really focus on getting those values right on the scale. 4. Just going to put it in for now. And the overall effect changes once you've got no more white in, because at the moment, everything that we've got, I'm going to scribble those into each other a little bit. Everything that we've got on the panel, we're seeing like in relation to the white bit here. So now we're going even darker. We're like a 1.5-ish. Almost as dark as the cast shadow, but not quite. This is going to be quite difficult to see the difference between them. But as I say, if you're doing this at home, hopefully I won't have to play around with them too much for the sake of the camera. But if you're doing this at home, like just make sure you nail the mixes with your own value scale, and you'll see how it works. Just a little bit lighter this. Darker than this value. I'll use my dark brush for this. So I'm hoping this is going to be just a tiny bit lighter than the cast shadow. Yeah, I can see it here. I don't know if it's going to come across too well on the screen. Just a little bit lighter, but it's subtle, you know. Here I can't really see the difference because the paint isn't really thick enough. But I want it just a little bit darker than this top. I might have to make the top a little bit lighter so you can see it. I can see it here, but I don't know if it's coming across. And then on this right hand bit right over here, we were up to a value 3, so I can put in some of my value 3 that I had mixed. Basically the same value as I've got here. Now we've got it filled in, you know, even though we haven't done any edge handling yet. Got a bit of a paint ridge there. You can see how the values are working. I'm going to try using a soft synthetic brush with the darker values, because if I get this really even and it covers better, the value might be better to see. Might be easier to see, sorry. Soft brush like this is Winsor & Newton set to gold. Will often cover better, a soft synthetic will cover better with thinner paint than a hog will, because you get, with a hog, you get more of the texture. That looks a bit, bit better. But this is still, you know, this is not really thin paint. It's thinner than I've used here. This is the thickest paint, you know, on the light face of the cube. Yeah, the flat synthetic is better for the darker value. Right, so you can just see a little bit of light here. You can just see the difference between, oh, I just got some lighter value in there. We don't want that really. You can just see the difference between this top part of the cube and the back. Like the values are close. Remember I was saying, like, these values are pretty close. But already there's enough for you to be able to see, to feel that there's a form there, right? Even though some of the painting is, let's be honest, it's a little bit sloppy, and I haven't done any edge handling yet. Everybody likes the edge handling part. That's coming in a minute. But even at this point, now your brain can feel the light again, now that all the values have been filled in, right? Pierre says, in the beginning of painting the shadow of the cube, you called the color burnt umber. Is that what? No, I meant to say raw umber. Did I say burnt umber? That's right, Guy. Trust the process. As long as you've got white in there, your eye is calibrating to the white. So now we've got all the values in, we can see the relationship between them. Hello, Sylvie. Good to see you. So let's do a little bit of edge softening. So this is slightly tricky now because we filled everything in. Like a lot of the time, if I'm actually doing a painting, I'll do all of the background first, because it means you can do all of the edge softening and then paint the actual thing with the hard edges. And that does work, but I wanted to do it this way around so you could see, even though the values look wrong as they're going down, like Guy says, trust the process, trust the value scale, trust ChromaMagic. And that is the experience I want you to have, like to think, oh, surely that value is wrong. And to want to change it, but to stay with what the scale tells you. Okay. So I'm going to put a couple of values in between, like darker values, to bring this more gradually down from the shadow into the light. Now, at this point, I mean, everything up to now, like anybody could do. At this point, like when you get to the edge handling, it does take a little bit of practice and skill. But notice the difference immediately. just softening this edge here, blending a little bit. Immediately, this part of the painting feels like it's now pushed behind this one. I'm going to restate these edges of the cube when I've done with this. Soften that edge there. Immediate depth. Cool. Same thing for the cast shadow. You almost can't see it back here because the edges have got so soft, right? Takes a little bit of finessing, a little bit of push and pull, like you might take too much away, you might soften it too much so that it gets too light, and have to bring some more dark in. That ain't the end of the word. Like, I would keep that one fairly hard for now. And this edge will get gradually harder as it gets closer to the cube, but it's still softer than these edges, right? Because this is the shadow edge. So I'm going to use my synthetic, I'm going to wipe it off. I'm going to hatch it a little bit. See that tiny little hatches? All the way down to the edge, but making them smaller the closer I get, and bigger the further away I get. And I'm going to wipe it off. And I should use a fresh brush really, because it's got too much paint on it. But then I'm going to drag across. And it gives you this softer edge. So all of the edges of the cast shadow are now slightly softer than the edges of the cube, which is how your brain knows that it's shadow and it's not an actual form. How much depth does that make? And I've only softened 2 edges. Well, arguably 3, this one as well. So this is the value like of a really, what ostensibly might seem like a really, really simple exercise, a bit beneath you even if you consider yourself an advanced painter. I promise you isn't. You know, the more you go over the basic skills, the better you get at everything. You want this stuff to become automatic. You want your edge softening to not have to think about it. You want to know, without having to think about it, which edges you need to soften. I think the top plane of my cube is a little bit dark. It is dark even compared to the photo. I think this value is about right, do you reckon? A little bit dark there. We'll do a little bit of adjustment now. We can bring up the value a little bit this side. I'm going to start adjusting the painting to the photo from what I can see on the screen. Slightly lighter top plane. Now we did it at 3. Is that a 3? Actually, I think my 3 was maybe a touch dark. Slightly lighter. So everything that I put on it now is going to mix with what's there. But I'm going to put the paint on thicker, right? Because it's an actual plane that has light hitting it. I'm just going to make it a little bit lighter, not too much. I think that might be too light. It's about right though. See, the thing is, if you can't paint something like this and make it look like it's actually there, physically there, how are you going to paint something really complicated, like, you know, a jug? I'm going to restate this edge. You see, this edge has got soft here. I'm going to restate this edge. Or think about a flower. You know, the basic kind of skills and knowledge that I'm using to paint this study are the same ones that I would use in a flower. Show you an example. Actually, the varnish has dried, so I can show you this one. It's the same. I'm using the brush the same way. I'm thinking about it the same way, right? So this flower, see, soft edge for shadow, hard edge for something against the light. Soft edges where the cast shadow comes out towards the ground. Basically the same. Same techniques. Yeah, I think so too. Went a tiny little bit too dark on the top edge, but better now. Ertie says the top plane is always a stickler. Sandra says, little boxes, ticky-tack. Yeah, everybody's paintings look the same. They're all made out of ticky-tack and they all look just the same. No edge. No edge here. Look, brush goes right through it. No edge there. But your brain makes it up. You know, we're painting shapes. We're painting light and shadow shapes. We're painting light. You know, I always think if you get something like this really right, when you lay the paint down, like I can have the paint as thick as I like here. Let's get the palette knife out and trowel it on. And if the value is right, it feels like you're painting with light. Oh, preferably don't drop your palette knife in the middle of the painting, though. I mean, that paint is thick now. I'm going to knock one light off so you can hopefully see, like, you know, you'll get a bit more kind of shadow on one side of the paint, so you can see how thick that is. When I was putting that on, I couldn't feel the surface of the panel at all. I was literally troweling it on like I'm plastering a wall. You know, I'll make a mark in it so you can see how deep the paint is. And all of these shadow areas are much thinner and much smoother, you know. We've got texture in the light, thick paint, impasto. We've got smoothness in the shadow and thinner paint. It's still, you know, there's enough paint on. You've got to have enough paint on there. The trick is, with this edge softening technique, you have to have enough paint on there. If you don't have enough, you end up lifting the paint up and it changes the values a little bit. Don't make sense? Have a go at this. If you've never done anything like this before, it's going to cost you $10 for the value scale, $20 or something for ChromaMagic. Michelle can remind me how much it is now. You know, I mean, that's next to nothing. That's like not even a tube of paint. And you can surprise yourself about what the values actually are. And don't forget, like, all of these values, like the value of the background board that I use, the tabletop, and the cube itself, they're all about the same value. So the only thing that's making a difference is shadow and light. All we're painting in this is shadow and light. Let's put this tiny little shadow like on the bottom of the cube here. Let's really make it stand out. Get a better, flatter synthetic for that. And here's a nice one. Just see if this will do it. This is a, what's this? Callier Angle Shader. I don't know, I just like the look of it in Jackson's. So I've got a bit of a drawing problem with my perspective here. This actually needs to be a little bit steep. Put in the tiny, you can actually put in the shadow and then sort it out afterwards. So if I put that in, then I can paint the foreground up to it again, as long as the value is right, and I can make it really, really thin. Just enough to show that it's there. Actually, we've got some light over here, so why don't we put some texture in there? You know, let's get a big wodge of paint, mix it up roughly. Too dark, right? If you're going to do this, you've got to be very careful of the values still. Texture in the light, thick paint in the light. Have a play. You know, it's just a cube painting, right? You're not going to be selling it. It's not like you're going to post it on Instagram and get 100,000 likes. People fighting to buy your painting. So play, you know, feel free, just play a little bit. We could soften this like way more. Practice your softening with it. I'm just playing now. See, this part for me is like the fun part of painting. When you've done the hard work, you've made the thing live. And then you're just kind of playing around, practicing this and that. Guy says, my favorite bit of these is the lost edges. I know, right? Your brain knows. You saw me paint over that. The edge is not there, but your brain makes it up. Your brain makes it up. Okay, so that's a nice short session for today. Now, if you ask me, I think my painting actually looks quite nice. I think it looks way nicer than the photo. It's got a little bit of something to it. You know, it's got a little bit of, you can make a cube painting look like a pretty nice painting. And then if you use exactly these techniques, you know, this is the one that we did 2 weeks ago before we did the color version, nail the values. And last week's Friday Live, which you can find in the live tab of my YouTube channel. Right, do it color with the same values, right? We're just doing the same thing this week, but with a much simpler shape. So you don't have to worry about whether the thing looks like a quince or whatever it is. Yeah, Donna, I think the Munsell book is up to about $2,000 now. It's just ridiculous. It really is. Okay. Have a go at this exercise. How long is it going to take you? That took us about half an hour-ish, something like that. Obviously, it's kind of slow because I'm talking and I'm explaining things as I go. You can grab the reference photo, as I say, down in the description. All the details for the value scale and ChromaMagic are there. You can get everything you need. All we've used is titanium white and raw umber. You can use black as well if you want, or you can mix neutrals. Have a go at this exercise. It gets even more interesting when you do it with a sphere. If you can paint one of these, a sphere, and really make it live, I promise you, as far as still life goes, you can paint almost anything and make it live. Okay? I hope you enjoyed the session today. Thanks very much for coming, everybody. Pizza time for me. And I'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.